Okay, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for taking your time this evening to come and hear about EDI at Clifton High. The reason we decided to put on this forum is, one, to share what's happening at the school, but also to invite collaboration. So it's a collaborative project. And those of you who have said that you would like to contribute to our EDI journey, I will email you separately to see how we can do that. Just to let you know, the reason that I'm a tiny version of me in the corner is, in the name of inclusion, we are recording it so that anyone who couldn't make it can also view it. The other thing to mention is that I have a really terrible cold, so my voice projection isn't the best today, but I will do my best. So I'd just like to share with you some of the things that we have been doing this year. I started in January last year, and since then I think we have made quite a lot of progress, and we're on a journey. So I'm going to talk to you about sorry, let me just get rid of that. Talk to you about what's happening, our school vision, our success in 2023 and 24, and then I will invite you to ask some questions at the end. I don't think this clicker's going to work. Hold on. So this slide is blurry and I have no idea why, but I will read it to you. So we the role of EDI lead covers all aspects of the school, but we do have a focus for the next 3 years, and I'll go into each section in more detail as we go through. But we're focusing on safeguarding of policy, dialogic learning and language, having a diverse curriculum, inclusive spaces, local and global networks, and people advocacy. We have decided to focus over the last year and over the next 3 years on anti-racism and neurodiversity. And the reason for that is we want to delve deep into those areas and make sure those areas are covered fully in all aspects of school life, rather than just sweeping over and then moving on to the next thing. But as issues arrive, I am here to support with all aspects of inclusion. Just to tell you about myself and how I got this role, I was teaching for 15 years in primary education, and then I did a master's in culture, diaspora and ethnicity, and started researching anti-racist curriculum design. And through that, I began a project called the Global Roots Project, where children photograph their local communities, they take cameras out, and the plan is, there is no plan. They just go out and they explore their local community and share that at an exhibition with other schools and other communities. So we have an exhibition in London and an exhibition in Bristol each year. This year it should be an art space in Bristol, and it's the year 7s who are taking part. And then in London last year we had an exhibition at Alexandra Palace. So that's how I sort of came into doing this particular role. And I have expertise through that experience, but I think it's important not to ever call yourself an expert. And part of this journey is that we are all learning and we all need to be ready to learn. So, you know, I'm ready to learn as well. I'm not claiming to know everything about everything. I want us to collaborate and share our knowledge together. So I'm going to go through each of those aspects that I talked about and just go into a bit more detail about what we've been doing at a school. So safeguarding and policy, we've just created a new responding to discrimination policy, which centres around being an upstander, calling in, and you can see some more information about that if you want to have a look at the end out there. So calling in is all about creating a community and a culture where we are not scared to speak up, and that we do address discrimination in any form. So whether it's intentional or unintentional, direct or indirect, it's always addressed. But when it's addressed, it's done with compassion and through providing context, remembering that we're in a school, we're in a learning space, and we need to make sure that we provide a space where people can learn. So where it differs to calling out is if you call someone out, you're silencing them, you say, oh, you can't say that, can't believe you said that, you know, cancel culture, that kind of thing. Calling in is more about inviting someone into a conversation. So can you explain why you said that? Can you explain what you meant by that? Do you understand the history of that term? Perhaps you don't, and maybe that's why we need to educate further. So calling in is something that we've spoken to all of the senior school and sixth form about. And as I said, we are trying to focus our time on specific areas rather than trying to do everything at once. So this year, Key Stage 3, for example, have had more lessons and focus than other year groups. But next year, we're going to start focusing more on junior school as Key Stage 3 continue some of those lessons that we've implemented and continue them on. So that's calling it. And then dialogic learning and language. My project work really centres on dialogic learning, being student-centred, giving pupils a voice, and them being able to share their knowledge and their community knowledge with the school. So in terms of dialogic learning and language, all teachers have had training in anti-racism and language. That was from Arise, Anti-Racism in School Education, which is run by someone called Paula Lawton, who I've worked with before. And yeah, I trust her very well. And then the lessons. So you may have seen some of this outside. Part of this is Key Stage 3 health and wellbeing, and it's looking at language and the history of slurs, I guess. So it comes from the idea that histories are sometimes hidden, and each of these lessons try to uncover stories that haven't yet been told. So, for example, this is early last year. I don't know if any of you have heard of KSI. He's a YouTuber. He used the P word, the shortening of the word Pakistani, in one of his sort of, it was a spoof of Countdown. So he used this word, and it's something that children will, you know, perhaps have seen. And the South Asian music community sort of called this out or called it in. And some of the tweets went viral about it. And one of those tweets was from a dubstep artist called Stuck Knight, who's a friend of mine. So I interviewed his brother to find out why is this word so traumatic for him and his brother. So we did an interview. It's not all about trauma, so it's quite interesting about their South Asian music heritage. But it talks about the fact that actually their father was killed in a racist attack in the 80s. And every time they hear that word, it's really traumatic. So sharing this story with children, with the Key Stage 3 children, helps them understand that while it might not be traumatic for you, it is for somebody else. And therefore, this is the reason it can't be used. And then to give them further context, then the year group 4 looking at the Brick Lane uprisings in Brick Lane following the murder of Altab Ali in the 1970s. So this is going back 10 years before this, something quite similar happening. So to see that it's not a one-off incident, that there's a pattern. And these are photos by Paul Trevor, who was living in Brick Lane in the 1970s. So I wrote to Paul Trevor and said, can I license your images? And so I would then turn Paul Trevor's photos into lessons. So it's about uncovering these stories. And I think it is important with EDI that celebrating heritage, celebrating different cultures is fantastic, but sometimes it's not always fun. Sometimes there are some difficult topics that need to be educated and understood. So starting off with that being the series of lessons is how have British citizens with the Caribbean been up to standards. And again, I'm covering stories that haven't yet been told. This is my grandfather-in-law who ship was torpedoed, and he saved all the crew from the ship, which was in a BBC interview. And he also sang in a duo with Ainsley Harriot's dad. So, so the following lessons to all of these then focus on diaspora contributions to British identity and culture. So we then look at Caribbean diaspora heritage music. We look at, from my friend whose father was attacked in the 1980s, their South Asian heritage, how it's influenced their dubstep music. So it all, you know, all these lessons intertwine. This is a photo of Paul Trevor, of a school teacher, calling out, I'd say, probably the National Front who were on Brick Lane that day. This is about a tweet from KSI. And then moving on, so talking about dialogic learning, I've talked to you about my project, the Global Roots Project. This is someone that I met in Bristol with a very similar approach to inclusion and diversity, Lewis Wedlock. So he does workshops with primarily with young boys and young men, but he at the school worked with Key Stage 3 and 6th form groups of young boys and young girls to talk about a range of topics. And the reason it's a range of topics is because it's student-centred. So where the students want to take the conversation is where the conversation goes. So we talked about masculinity, femininity and feminism, allyship, anti-racism and accountability. And he engages really, really well with the students. And he's someone that we are hoping to invite back. I'm actually meeting him tomorrow to work with children on a more sequential basis rather than a one-off session. And he's Bristol, so I do try to connect with people in Bristol so that we can keep those connections going. So the Global Roots Project, this is the exhibition we had at Trinity Centre last year, and then at Central Palace. The CR EDI prefect came down to visit the one in Alexandra Palace. We invite speakers to come and talk about anti-racist curriculum design. And then Carly Atford, who you may have heard of him, he's from Bristol. He has collaborated and created some lessons, online lessons for children to learn photography skills. So this project started when I was doing some archive photography, and I went out with my friend and we were photographing people and recording their stories. And on our first ever trip that we went out on, I photographed an elderly gentleman outside his house. He said, "Oh, you've come to the right place today." Took his photograph, recorded him for an hour, and he told me the most incredible story about his fight for justice for his friend George Davis. Famous campaign, George Davis is okay, and how he went with his lorry through the gates of Buckingham Palace, went to prison and was stamping the shirts with George Davis is innocent, okay. So it was a working class fight for justice. Recorded his story, didn't look at it for 2 years. The first Global Roots exhibition, I thought it'd be good to share the story. So I noticed his chair was still outside his house, but he wasn't there. And unfortunately, he has passed away. So I spoke to his family, said, "Can I use this photograph?" And they said, "Yes, that's fine." We're really pleased. I sent them the hour-long recording of his life story, which they couldn't believe. They received it. And then now Sky TV phoned me up the other day and said, "We've heard you've got this recording. They're making a documentary about the innocent and guilty. Can they use the audio?" And the reason I'm telling you all of this is that that's what I want students to be able to do, is to be able to go out into their communities and uncover, you know, the unsung heroes or interesting. So every time you go out, you uncover an interesting story. And we've worked with children in Brick Lane, in Haringey, and Tower Hamlets, and they've told the stories of the markets, and, you know, all different stories. So some of the photos out there are from Clifton. Actually, the best ones are missing because I had a meeting with the V&A about the project, and obviously I took the best photos with me. And then the celebration of heritage. So again, keeping with that about being student-centred, is the People Council, the EDI People Council, wanted to put on an event. So for all of the senior school, students were invited to come and celebrate any aspect of their heritage that they want to celebrate in any way that they want. And we invited parents to come and have a look round. I started this with an assembly where I talked about my Anglo-Indian heritage and how I've only sort of really discovered what that's about as an adult, and inviting them to go and speak to their families and find out about their heritage so that they can share that with the rest of the school. This is something we will repeat every year, but potentially with more of a focus, so maybe a music focus or a boot each year to have a bit of a focus. But it was a great start, and the pupils really enjoyed sharing their identity and cultures. So they're moving on to diversity in the curriculum, done an audit of all the books from nursery up to sixth form, a very thorough audit based on different criteria, and then we've identified which year groups need more diversity within the protagonists, the authors, where it was written, and you know, these are just some books that children might see in their learning. Also, the library is continually auditing their books. I've asked all teachers to look at one unit of learning. So obviously, change happens over time. So I've asked them to focus on one unit of learning where they think they can improve the inclusion, diversity, and collaboration. So this is a learning prism where we look at aspects of what makes up a lesson. So having open questions, it being child-led. Specific flows means taking a specific moment in time, or a specific person, or a specific event, and then exploring how that connects to different aspects of history and today. Having diverse examples and sources, and always linking it to today. So these are some of the people or figures who are appearing in the teachers' lessons as a result of them looking at their lessons through the prism. So then inclusive classrooms. So I'll go through the list that I showed you at the start. So inclusive classrooms, all teachers have received some training on having an inclusive classroom. They've also received training on autism. We've also had training recently like courageous conversations. You know, the things that are happening in the world today can be challenging, to say the least. So all teachers have been trained in having those courageous conversations so that a student should feel that they can go and speak to their teacher and express how they're feeling, and the teacher may not have the answers, but at least they can empathise and have that conversation. In junior school, all the teachers use zones of regulation as a way to talk to children about their emotions and how to regulate those emotions. And we're also moving this into senior school. And in senior school, they do have check-ins twice a week, where pupils can say how they're feeling and what they need in order to feel best. We have pupil councils and societies, so there's the EDI Pupil Council, there's a diversity society where students share aspects that they think they would like to see in the school. Very good in Spain, who's mental health lead, who's there for all students as well. So this is what we're thinking it might look like in senior school, where there's more thinking about nuance of emotion and you know, having that richer language compared to the junior school. And then in health and wellbeing, So in Key Stage 2, we've got leadership lessons, which are celebrating difference. And then in Key Stage 3, there's a range of lessons thinking about what makes you you, masking and unmasking, ADHD and autism on the spectrum. And then going back to that inclusive classrooms, inviting the students to design an inclusive school. With an infinite budget, what would you do to create an inclusive school? And then we are celebrating Neurodiversity Week, not during the National Neurodiversity Week. So if you don't see it that week, I don't think we're not doing anything. It's just we're doing it in a slightly different week, just because of, you know, we have a trip a day. So we need to make sure everyone's there. And then, as I said, we connect with local communities, local and global networks. This is Aoife Grillo, who is a poet from London but lives in Bristol. He works at Bristol University. Wrote a fantastic poem called Boss Man. She performed at Assembly. Also wrote a chapter in this book, Black Joy, where he wrote about the joy of living on a council estate in Hackney. And Lawrence Fu, some of you may have heard of, he created Cargo Classroom, which is a range of resources which focus on Black history. And he's a big activist in Bristol, so he's about everywhere. But both of these poets came in during National Poetry Day, celebrating African diaspora heritage. And we're thinking about inviting Aoife back to do some more writing workshops, because he was just really, really engaging and quite a funny character. But these are some of the people that we've worked with already. So Aoife Grillo and Paula Lawton through the training, Carly Ackford through the photography workshop, Lewis Wedlock through his dialogic sessions, Lawrence Fu for his poetry. Blair, so we have conducted a external audit, which will repeated every year. It's a racial equity audit, repeated every year for 3 years. And through that, we have got a big focus on recruitment. So we've created a positive action guide, which looks at where we are advertising, how our interview process, how fair is the interview process, looking at people's journey. You know, for example, I don't have A levels, I dropped out, but I do have a master's, you know, so sometimes your journey is not linear. And just to take that into consideration when looking at candidates, looking at the process, the questions that we ask, focusing on bias, and we are working with beginning working with Babasa, an organisation who supports young global majority people into work. So there's quite a lot in the recruitment. And then this is looking at people that and it's come in. So get rid of so much already. These are all women working in tech. So the co-director of my company is works in AI design, creating AI company. So to invite some of these women in tech to come and promote STEM and tech subjects with girls and boys. People advocacy, so as I said, we have the Diversity Society, People Council, and really put it on the students to think about what we're going to do for Pride, what we're going to do for Pride, what we're going to do for Neurodiversity Week. They decided everything we were going to do for the celebration of heritage. It's an opportunity for them to share ideas and plan for future events. And these are our current EDI prefects who are full of ideas. That's it. So I hope that's sort of took you on a bit of a tour of what we've been working on and what we're continuing to work on. I'm happy to take some questions. My sort of caveat is that I will try to answer all questions now, but as I said, I'm not always an expert in every single thing. You know, sometimes it may be that I need to take that note that down, take it away, and look at it. So, you know, come at me with whatever you want to ask, and I'll try my best to answer it now, or I will take it away to discuss with the rest of the school. I did try to answer some of the questions that you sent in through my slides, but if anyone's got a question, you can just put your hand up.
university, motivated that with a wide range of different university challenges that kids have in school. There's my feedback I receive is that there's a strong sense of trying to normalise behaviour, and perhaps some maybe some missed opportunities to play or basically excellent. And there's easy feedback of the exercise heavy with the Chanel, but the benefit is that they're not as celebrated for their potential brilliance as they are encouraged in team.
Yeah, and I think through those Key Stage 3 lessons that we are, and the leadership lessons with Key Stage 2 and the Key Stage 3 lessons that we're starting, I think the first one next week, that's what we really want to show is a spectrum, but also that we are all neurodiverse, and actually some of the teachers are neurodivergent, you know, and many successful people in society are neurodivergent, and they can, I think it's a balance, isn't it? Because there are ways that being neurodivergent can really help you to excel in ways that maybe a neurotypical person may not in that context. But also need to recognise that there are challenges and that some people do have quite profound needs that you know need support. So I think just understanding that we're all different, and unfortunately society at present is set up in a particular way that doesn't always make it the easiest for a neurodivergent person to succeed, but we want to create a space where people feel like they can. Yeah, we're trying to, that's what we're trying to do through those lessons. Any other questions? It's just the gentleman first and then lady next.
I agree, it's like to see what thank you for that. My question is that this is such an enormous subject, and there's so many different parts to the subject. Like, I can't imagine it possible that any one person to be kind of fully expert in all of them. But we all, through our own experiences, have to learn lots and how can we best use to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve, or how do you want us to engage with you?
So I sent out. I completely agree, which is why we're trying to focus on particular areas, and I do spend a lot of my time in me. It's not me just doing all of this. This is the whole school doing all of this. You know, I spend a lot of my time in meetings finding out what people are doing, or you know, supporting, or you know, sometimes the teachers supporting me because it's an area that they have more knowledge in. So it is a school project, not me. I'm just leading this particular area. But my key value is collaboration, which is why I invited you all. And the reason I asked if you would like to contribute is so we can investigate. So I have had a couple of parents in to speak to, but I will email anyone who said they would like to contribute to find out if we want to meet, or in what capacity they might be able to help, whether it's speaking to the children on a particular topic or advising about some speakers. I think it will depend on in what capacity that person feels they can help. However, also today I'm sort of standing on a stage presenting because it's the first time I've spoken to you. It would be nice to have some more forums, especially because we have had some engagement here, and maybe on a more informal, now that you know what it is we're trying to achieve, it could be that we just sit around the table and have a conversation in a more informal way to collaborate in that way. But yeah, if ever you feel you want to share something, just email me as well. My email's there. I'm always happy to meet people. My job's a little bit flexible, so I get freedom to actually engage.
Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. It's really nice to see that you are engaging in collaborating with Bristol-based people to come into school as well. That's great, because I didn't know that. And I know that was the big thing I was going to ask about. So my question really is about when you said the school's trying to diversify their teaching staff. I'm just wondering if those, if that's happening, something that's happening now, or happening, adverts that are coming out for the new academic year, how far along in the process of that?
It has started, so can't tell you exactly when the document was finished, but definitely since I'd say September, we started working through the steps. We've still got a way to go, and in terms of engaging with global majority teachers, there are many challenges, particularly in Bristol, with that as a whole area, unfortunately. But we are really trying to focus on every single possible aspect that we can. So not just the advertising process, you know, career development, but also I'm hoping that as people see the work that we're doing in the school, that it might attract people to come and work here, because I really want it to be authentic and not just put an advert out and put it in the right place, but we haven't done anything else. So yeah, we have started that process and we're continuing it on.
Right, also I think it will encourage children as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And my last question was to do with Black History Month. Is it something that the school is going to continue doing during the month, or is it more to be throughout the whole curriculum throughout the year?
So the aim this year, so we had Diaspora Heritage focus, but it was around National Poetry Day, which happens to fall in October, but that, you know, and then we decided to do Black History 365, where we were going to talk to the students about all the things that we're doing throughout the year, to show that it isn't just a month. Unfortunately, I'm not always ill. I was ill on the day that I was going to talk to them about that, so it didn't get the impact that we intended. But I think there's a balance with Black History Month. So I personally probably don't like it. I think it's better that the whole system was better and that everything is taught well throughout the year. But I do think there is an argument, which I've heard from other people, so, you know, Aoife Grillo was saying, you know, it's important to highlight that it's an area that hasn't had enough focus, and to sort of about covering hidden history. So, you know, there's different ways of looking at it. But I will, if we do it, then I try to think about it being done in a meaningful way, rather than, you know, I always talk about, I don't want to do anything that's tokenistic. That's a big thing that I try to avoid. So I'll answer your question. Any other questions? No. If something pops up, just email me, and if you want to, we've got about 10 minutes to spare, so if you want to come speak to me, or Kat Winton, who is head of Key Stage 3 Health and Wellbeing, where a lot of the lessons that I've designed are being taught, along with many other lessons that other teachers have created. We have to have a bespoke health and wellbeing curriculum, which is really unique. I see a lot of schools just buy into a scheme. You know, it's a bespoke curriculum, which is, you know, really beneficial to our students, and focuses on the locality and their needs. So yeah, feel free to speak to Kat or myself, or have a look at the resources if you didn't get time. You just want to go home, you may go home. But I really appreciate you coming, and I will get in touch again about how we can connect going forward. Thank you. Thanks. Sorry to big narrow you down to health and wellbeing there. Stop recording.